what machine learning can come in is help speed that up. We can move this like really computationally expensive post-processing away. If we could deploy, using machine learning to basically do the pattern recognition, some contextually aware machine learning application and speed that up so that when you're running the PIV, you're doing the analysis on the fly. That would be a game changer for experimentation. So try not to think about machine learning as just something that a faster way to do analysis. It's also a faster way to do research. And that's the world we're in now, is working on shorter cycle times, producing more outputs, working with more complex systems. I mean, the world as we know it is going to reach the point soon where it's going to be difficult for a single person to solve a problem. You're going to become more reliant on machines to work with you to do your research. And so it's a good example because I think it firmly embodies just what I said.
Thanks, Forrest. I think that's a good point about working with different individuals and on teams on these large, complex problems. There's a follow-up question from David Pravat in the chat box, and I think it builds on something Professor Tamura talked about in terms of education. But with to change the outcomes, well, let me read the question. Do any of the three panelists have concerns regarding the progress of wind engineering as a profession going forward? Are we still training sufficient wind engineers and providing with the right skills to address 21st century problems? I don't know who wants to take that first. I think it's an important issue for the discipline, and I think it's a nice way to summarize these 6 seminars that Dr. Baker has arranged. Go ahead, Chris.
From my perspective, the future of wind engineering doesn't so much lie as a separate subject, but as a subject embedded in a whole range of other disciplines, from transportation engineering, structural engineering, environmental engineering, water engineering, as Professor Tamura said, interactions all the way around. If I were to criticize my wind engineering colleagues, and I do sometimes, I would say that we have tended to define the subject too tightly. And I think the challenge for wind engineers and for wind engineering practitioners is to look more widely and to look at interactions with other subject areas. And that can be hugely challenging. Perhaps one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do in my career is to understand agronomists and the way they speak, and to try to communicate wind engineering to people who are used to growing wheat. And I think that's just a microcosm of how it is across the board. So if anything, I would say wind engineering needs to broaden its scope and to recognize that it's a vital component of a multidisciplinary endeavor. That's almost like preaching, Greg. I do apologize.
Hey, Greg, can I add to that?
Of course.
The way that I've sort of framed this in my head, I listened to an audiobook not too long ago. I listened to a linguist up at Columbia who studied languages across the world. And it was really fascinating to understand the history of languages. Today we have around 6,000 languages in the world, depending on how you count them. But we haven't seen any new languages in modern history, really, once we started writing things down and started codifying it. Linguists today now predict that within 100 years, there will only be about 500 languages that are being used. So I want to draw a parallel to that, to our world. We've diversified so much. I mean, the 20th century, there was so much diversification in what we're doing. I think you're going to see increased homogenization of fields. And so if you think far ahead, I mean, fields like engineering and medicine, are they going to be any different? There's going to be 2 different fields in 200 years, 300 years? Probably not, right? So we're in this transition. So what's the next 25 years of that 200-year change look like? And so if you think of it that way, you can kind of work your way in. So what I do want to say, though, the thing that's really, here's the best part, though. You think about all your colleagues, think about all the people you know in the community. Who better to lead? We have such an incredible dynamic group of people that are good to work with, that are knowledgeable, that grew up with a multidisciplinary background. And so I think this group has the right stuff to shepherd these changes. And I would love to see more involvement from the community in those discussions, because it's being led by other fields primarily. You don't see the civils and the mechanicals jumping in as much as you do some of the the other areas, computer science, et cetera.
All right. Thank you. If there's any last comments, otherwise we'll wrap up now. Again, I want to thank Dr. Baker for organizing this series, and it's very enjoyable. And everything is online, and if you have further questions, you can send them to the panelists, and I'm sure they'll be happy to respond to you. So I'll turn it back to Chris here. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And indeed, there are further questions, but we're running out of time now. I have in the past got some colleagues to answer questions in written form as well, and I might well try to do that as well. So I warn Forrest and UK, you might be hearing from me. As regards what happens now, well, first of all, I have to thank both the speakers and Greg for looking after the questions, and behind the scenes for Grace Yam for dealing with the chat. The recordings of the sessions will be online sometime within the next 24 hours. I won't promise when, but hopefully not too far in the future. This is the last of the seminars, as I said. What I intend to do is to write a blog post and put it onto my website, sort of reviewing it, maybe asking a few questions. I'll let people know when that's there by email, and people can respond and answer. But to sum up, I'd like to say thank you to you all, and wish you all a very good rest of the day, however long that might last, wherever you are at the moment. So I'll just put up one final slide, and I'll let people log off at their leisure. So thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, the Chris, the very nice organization, the excellent organization, and your contribution is very significant in our wind engineering community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So I will now mute.